Hello and welcome back to Biology 101. In this video, we'll be talking about the digestive system. So what exactly is the digestive system? You can think of the digestive system as your body's personal factory plant. In our digestive factory, we utilize food as our basic material, which is ingested through the mouth. This food moves along a conveyor belt known as our gastrointestinal tract, which includes organs such as our esophagus. The conveyor belt moves the food on it through a process known as peristalsis, where our canal muscles contract and relax involuntarily, pushing the content forward through our gastrointestinal tract. The food is transported to a machine known as the stomach, which chemically and mechanically processes the food. The resulting material is further chemically and enzymatically processed by fluids released by organs, or what's analogous to large chemical tanks in a factory, such as the gallbladder, liver, and the pancreas. The resulting processed material is extracted for its nutrients and use of materials by the intestines, where they are absorbed and eventually transported into the body's bloodstream. Just like in a factory, any unused material or waste are released back out into the environment, except in our body's case, it's released out through our anus. Now that we have a basic idea of how our digestive system functions, let's look at the specific structures that compose it. Starting with the mouth. The mouth, or the oral cavity, is an opening through which food and air can enter the body. The oral cavity contains 32 teeth, each of which are used to chew and mechanically process the food that we consume into smaller pieces that are easily digestible. These teeth are held in place by tissues in the upper and lower jaws called the gums. The teeth are assisted in the process of chewing by a skeletal muscle known as the tongue. The tongue functions by moving the food around in our mouth and moistening the chewed food, which we'll be referring to now as the bolus. Neatly enough, the upper surface of our tongue contains taste buds, which are sensory organs which allow us to taste our food. Finally, the buccal membrane is the inner lining of the mouth along the back of the lips and the cheeks, which contains our salivary glands. These glands release our saliva, a fluid mostly consisting of water, but also containing enzymes such as amylase, which help convert the carbohydrates that we consume into sugar. Now this leads us to the throat. Interestingly enough, our throat has two pipes, one called the trachea, which leads down to our lungs, and another called the esophagus. Now, you may be asking yourself, how does our body prevent the bolus we consumed in our mouth from going straight down into our lungs? And that would be a good question. To prevent ourselves from choking on the bolus, our throats have a special little flap called the epiglottis, which covers the trachea when we swallow, allowing the bolus to bounce off of it and be diverted to our esophagus. The esophagus itself is part of what we call the gastrointestinal tract and functions primarily through a process known as peristalsis, during which the esophagus's smooth muscles contract and relax to bring the bolus into the stomach through the cardiac opening. The stomach is a J-shaped organ that assists in the digestion of our food. The stomach is composed of 4 layers. The mucosa is the innermost lining of the stomach and releases what we call gastric juice from gastric glands within the mucosa. The gastric juice is a highly acidic fluid containing enzymes such as pepsin, which assist in the chemical digestion of the bolus by breaking down proteins into amino acids. The mucosa also contains mucus cells on its surface, which produce a mucus lining along the inner surface of the stomach, preventing it from being corroded by the highly acidic gastric juice. This layer also contains folds along its surface called rugae, which increase the stomach's surface area and smoothen out as the stomach gets filled. The submucosa is the layer underneath the mucosa consisting of fibrous connective tissue and nervous tissue. The nervous tissue within the submucosa controls the contraction of the stomach and the release of gastric juices. The muscularis is the third layer of the stomach and consists of a thick layer of muscles which contract and relax, mixing the contents of the stomach with gastric juice and aiding in mechanical digestion. Finally, the serosa is the outermost layer of the stomach, which wraps and confines the organ and is composed of connective tissue. The stomach's mechanical and chemical digestion turns the bolus, which entered from the esophagus, into a paste which we refer to as chyme. The chyme is squirted out of the stomach in controlled amounts by the pyloric sphincter into an organ known as the small intestine. The small intestine is an organ responsible for sustained peristalsis, completing digestion and absorbing the nutrients within the chyme. The small intestine is divided into three parts known as the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum in particular is unique in the fact that it contains several ducts connected to organs such as the liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas, all of which aid in chemical digestion. We will be calling these organs accessory organs. Now, more specifically, the liver regulates chemical levels in our blood and secretes bile, a greenish yellow substance which aids in the digestion of fats. The gallbladder is a small pear-like organ which stores this bile and releases it into the small intestine via the common bile duct. The pancreas is arguably the most important out of the three, and is an organ which produces a pancreatic juice containing enzymes such as trypsin, which digests proteins into peptides, peptidase, which digests peptides into amino acids, lipase, which digests lipids already broken down by the bile into fatty acids and glycerol, nuclease, which digests nucleic acids into nucleotides, and amylase, which we mentioned earlier in this video, which digests carbohydrates into simple sugars. All these accessory organs produce chemicals which further digest the chyme so that it is more easily absorbed by the small intestine. Speaking of which, let's go back to our discussion of the small intestine. The small intestine is lined with beds of special finger-like protrusions called villi. The villi increase the surface area of the small intestine, which assists in the absorption of nutrients. Each villus has a network of blood vessels or capillaries located near its surface, which transport the absorbed nutrients into our bloodstream. Now, while this may be the case for most nutrients, our body absorbs fatty acids a little bit differently. Fatty acids are absorbed through special capillaries called lacteals, which transfer the fatty acids into our lymphatic system, where they are converted into triglycerides. After the nutrients within our chyme are absorbed by the small intestine, we reach the final stage of the digestive system. The remaining undigested matter, which we'll be referring to as the feces, oozes into an organ we call the large intestine. The large intestine is a long tube-like organ consisting of four parts: the cecum, the colon, the rectum, and the anus. The large intestine functions by removing any remaining water or electrolytes from the feces, causing it to compact. It is also home to trillions of bacteria, which help ingest any remaining undigested material, while releasing an odorous gas that you're probably familiar with. Peristalsis within the large intestine moves the feces into the rectum. The rectum contains stretch receptors, which at a certain point signal the need to defecate, leading to the feces being pushed past the anal canal and exiting out the anal sphincter. So what did we learn in this video? Well, first, we covered a brief summary and an overview of how the digestive system functions similarly to a factory. We also learned about the various specific structures that compose the digestive system, including the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the accessory organs, and the large intestines, and how each one of these contribute to the overall system.